In 334 BC, a young king crossed into Asia with 40,000 soldiers, almost no food, and enough silver to last exactly 3 months. His royal treasury held less than 70 talents, barely enough to pay his army for a single season. His generals thought it was madness. His bankers thought it was suicide. Alexander thought it was just the beginning. What followed was the most audacious financial gamble in the ancient world. And it worked not because Alexander was lucky, but because he understood something most rulers never do: that war, at its core, is an economic machine. And if you know how to feed it, it becomes unstoppable. To understand what Alexander built, you first have to understand what he inherited. His father, Philip II of Macedon, was himself a financial genius. He didn't just raise an army, he industrialized warfare. Philip reformed the Macedonian tax system, seized gold mines in Thrace, and used that wealth to create the most professional standing army the Greek world had ever seen. The phalanx, 8-foot sarissas, siege engineers, and a cavalry that moved like thought itself. When Philip was assassinated in 336 BC, Alexander inherited that army along with a kingdom deeply in debt. The wars had cost a fortune. The treasury was nearly bare. And every neighboring kingdom was watching, waiting for the young, untested king to collapse under the weight of it all. He was 20 years old. He had inherited debts of roughly 500 talents and assets of perhaps 60 on paper. The Macedonian Empire was insolvent. And yet, within 2 years, Alexander would command the most powerful military force in the known world, funded not by inheritance, but by conquest. The strategy Alexander chose was radical in its simplicity. Use what little he had to take something bigger, then use that to take something bigger still. It was a compounding engine built on speed, momentum, and the psychology of victory. His first target was the Persian satrapy of Asia Minor, what we now call Western Turkey. The Persian Empire at this point was the largest the world had ever seen, stretching from Greece to India, with a treasury that made every other nation on earth look like a village market. Its king, Darius III, sat atop wealth so vast that the ancient sources couldn't agree on how to describe it. But Alexander didn't attack the center, he attacked the edges. At the Battle of Granicus in 334 BC, he smashed a Persian defensive force and immediately liberated the Greek cities of Asia Minor. And here is where his financial genius revealed itself. He didn't plunder those cities. He taxed them lightly and appointed loyal governors. He turned freed cities into paying tributaries. Within months, his campaign was funding itself. His logistics were as radical as his tactics. Where most ancient armies dragged enormous baggage trains of supplies, camp followers, and livestock, Alexander stripped his force lean. Soldiers carried their own equipment. Supply lines were replaced by speed. The army moved faster than any force in history, and speed meant arriving before defenders could organize, which meant easier victories, which meant more resources, which meant faster movement still. He also understood something modern economists call the multiplier effect. Every city he took didn't just add soldiers or silver, it added roads, ports, granaries, and administrative networks. He wasn't just conquering, he was absorbing entire economic infrastructures. The Persian Empire hadn't been built in a day, and Alexander was systematically harvesting centuries of institutional wealth. Then came Persepolis, and everything changed. In 330 BC, after defeating Darius at the battles of Issus and Gaugamela, Alexander marched into the Persian heartland and captured the empire's ceremonial capital. What he found inside the royal treasury of Persepolis was almost incomprehensible. Ancient sources record 120,000 talents of silver. Some historians estimate it conservatively at 180,000. To put that in context, Athens, at the height of its power, ran its entire democracy on roughly 400 talents per year. Alexander had just captured the equivalent of 450 years of Athenian state revenue in a single afternoon. The sheer physical scale of it posed a logistical crisis. Moving the treasure required 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels. The ancient world's largest army had just acquired the ancient world's largest payroll fund, and Alexander knew exactly what to do with it. He did not hoard it. He spent it strategically, surgically, and with remarkable discipline. Soldiers received generous bonuses. Veterans were paid off and sent home with honor. New soldiers were recruited from conquered territories and paid well. Local elites were co-opted with gifts and titles, turning potential rebels into invested stakeholders. Coins were struck, millions of them bearing Alexander's image, creating a single currency that unified trade across an empire stretching 3,000 miles. This last point is often overlooked, but it may have been his most consequential financial act. By minting a standardized coinage from Persian silver, Alexander didn't just pay his army, he created a monetary economy across regions that had operated on barter and commodity exchange for centuries. He didn't just conquer markets, he created them. Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BC at 32 years old. The cause is still debated: fever, poison, grief, or simply a body that had absorbed too many wounds to survive one more illness. He left no clear heir and no succession plan. The empire he had built in 13 years of relentless war fragmented almost immediately. His generals, the Diadochi, spent the next 50 years tearing the empire apart. But even in fragmentation, Alexander's financial legacy endured. The kingdoms that rose from his empire, Ptolemaic Egypt, Seleucid Persia, and Antigonid Macedonia, all operated on the economic foundations he had built. His coinage continued to circulate. His trade routes remained open. The cities he founded, over 20 bearing his name, became economic hubs that would shape commerce for centuries. Economists who study ancient monetary history often point to Alexander's conquests as the event that monetized the ancient world. The 330,000 talents of Persian silver that he released into circulation caused a price revolution across the Mediterranean. It funded the Hellenistic age, that extraordinary flowering of science, philosophy, and art from Alexandria to Antioch, and eventually flowed west into Rome, financing the next great empire. He came to the throne with 60 talents and 3 months of payroll. He left behind a monetized world. So what does a 2,300-year-old military campaign teach us today? Alexander's story is not really about conquest. It's about the relationship between capital and momentum. He understood that wealth is not something you sit on, it's something you deploy. He understood that the fastest way to build resources is to convert early, imperfect resources into action and let the results fund the next step. He understood that legitimacy, the sense that people benefit from being part of your system, is worth more in the long run than raw extraction. He also understood something deeply uncomfortable: that enormous fortunes, whether of nations or individuals, are rarely built by those who wait for perfect conditions. They are built by people willing to cross into Asia with 3 months of silver and an idea that speed and strategy could outrun any disadvantage. History's most transformative financial moves rarely look safe from the inside. They look like madness right up until the moment they don't. He had nothing. Then he had everything. And then he was gone. The money outlasted the man.